Greetings everybody, apologies for the change in setting from my usual. This is going to be a rather rushed and off-the-cuff video because I just made a rather unexpected sale right before the weekend, and next week I'm going to be out of town, and I really want to get this thing to the post office as soon as possible and not make my buyer wait an additional week for this instrument. I've had this old Butte on sale on my Facebook Marketplace profile for a couple of months at this point, and I really haven't had any good leads. Usually if you don't get anything in the first week, it's pretty hopeless unless you delete your listing and you repost it again. I've just dealt with the occasional time waster and really not gotten anywhere as far as selling this instrument. I was thinking about maybe contacting a couple of instrument museums, since this is more of a collector's item than an actual player, but then I got a message the other day and I told this customer I would get the shipping details sorted out before the weekend. And here we are. I've put it off as long as I can, so we're going to make this video real quick and get this beautiful beast shipped off to its next owner. This is the oldest brass instrument I have ever had the pleasure of owning, and although it didn't live up to my playability standards and I didn't get much use out of it in actual live music settings, it was a really fun one to have around for a while, and while I'll be excited to pass the torch on to someone else and slim down my inventory a little bit further as I get ready to move out of my college apartment, this is nonetheless very much deserving of a show and tell on the channel. This is a Besson Brevete Baritone horn from 1885. Let's get started. We'll look at some of the features of this beautiful Besson. We'll start off with the bell engraving. We've got Chicago bore, 40 medals of honor, the Fontaine Besson logo and namesake below it, prototype, which I think was kind of just the model name of that time. I've seen prototype in quotes on a lot of Besson instruments of this general time period, and I don't think it necessarily means that this was, in a literal sense, a prototype instrument. Nonetheless, though, we have the address for the London factory underneath that, 198 Euston Road. And then, what's interesting is we see that this was designed for the American market. We see Carl Fischer, who was then based at 6 4th Avenue, New York, and was the sole agent in the United States for the Besson company. On the valve block as well, we have the F. Besson name as well as Brevete under it. That's where I'm getting the model name from. So as far as I'm concerned, this is a Besson Brevete. And then the serial, as far as I can read, is not the most legible. It's been a little bit worn away with time, but we have one in the lower 35,000s, which is where I'm getting that 1885 figure from. Besides that, there's not much etching on this instrument to look at. There is an interesting little feature where the valve block from 1 to 3 is numbered 13, 14, 15, and the valve stems are numbered similarly. These valves are also the principal reason as to why this instrument is not a player by any means and cannot easily be made into one. We are down to the raw copper on all of the valves all the way around. There is no plating left whatsoever, and so I've concocted some mess of slide grease and thicker oil to try and get the valves to seal a little bit better in their casings in spite of the lost plating. Also worth noting is that the pitch standard that we take for granted today, that is the pitch A4 being 440 Hertz, was not the same at the time. This instrument is built for high pitch. There were two separate pitches, high pitch and low pitch. I think high pitch was a little more common around this time, and that was around A equals 457, I want to say. I'm gonna have to check on that and make sure I got that right. But whatever that exact Hertz measurement might be, the difference between that high pitch and modern pitch of 440, or some European orchestras use 442, is close to a semitone. So if I push this tuning slide all the way and I push the valve slides back in, this instrument actually plays a B natural, more or less, as its fundamental, rather than a B flat. It is a little shaky trying to play this purely a half step up from the typical modern B flat, but it is pretty close to a half step high. Pulling out the main tuning slide almost as far as it will go will get you to that modern B flat standard based on A4 equaling 440 Hertz, but there is a crack in one of these pipes, and it's really not ideal to have the tuning slide hanging off this far, even if the tubes were in perfect condition. Speaking of those valve slides, we have an interesting feature where valve slides 1 and 2 are behind the valve block, whereas what's in front of the valve block is just the lead pipe and sax horn style tuning slide. This style of construction was a lot more common in the olden days. You don't typically see baritones made like this anymore, and I honestly have never had good luck with baritones built with sax horn style tuning. There have just always been crazy intonation quirks coming from such instruments, but honestly this is pretty close to what we would consider a traditional French sax horn. By modern standards, to me it's mostly just a baritone, but it has some sax horn-like features in terms of the lead pipe and bell geometry. Up top on this very tarnished bell, I think we've got about a 9-inch flare. Another fun feature of the time, we've got a belt buckle here in case you want to march with it, as well as this lyre holder here. So this was at one point a marching-friendly instrument. The only water key on this instrument is on the main slide there, and the mouthpiece receiver on this instrument, which is very heavily braced to the bell in 2 separate locations, is what I would call small-ish shank. What I mean by that is if you take a modern small shank mouthpiece, it goes a little too far into the shank. And this here is a rather special mouthpiece. This is a Vincent Bach Corporation New York size 7. But not just that, it has this O labeled near the throat of the mouthpiece, which I've been told, and I'm a little skeptical here, I've been told that it's an Olds shank, which tracks in some ways. The Olds company around this time used oversized shanks on their cornets. However, I've heard that their trombone shanks were actually a little undersized at this time. And this is, as I mentioned, slightly oversized, and it fits this receiver nicely. So if anybody has any insight as to what that O or 0 might happen to mean, please let me know in the comments. This does seem to be a regular US Morse taper, nothing too crazy in terms of how the tubing tapers. It's just a slightly wider shank that fits this receiver a little bit better than your typical small shank mouthpiece. As mentioned, this instrument is not a player, mostly due to the lack of air tightness in the valve block. And believe me, my boss at Clearwater Music at the time when I restored this, and I really tried hard to find any other possible culprit. We've soldered all along the lead pipe, trying to fix these little pinhole leaks that we thought might or might not be there. We did the soap test and we got some bubbles along the lead pipe. We thought we plugged that all up, and still the instrument just did not play very well. And I think all there really is to it is the fact that these valves are not airtight with their casings. There is a little bit of wiggle there when I take the valve out and I wiggle it side to side, and that really just tells us that the valves are too narrow relative to the casing, and there is air passing all through the valve chamber, regardless of whether the valve is pressed or not, and that just leads to an airy, out of tune, undefined sort of sound and slotting pattern, unfortunately. Either way though, I did try to record some nice demos for you. I was having issues with my mic as well, so some of the demos are different mics and some of them don't have mic'd audio at all, but hopefully you'll enjoy some more martial and some more lyrical sounds out of this instrument. As I mentioned, these sax horn wrap instruments always just have these weird quibbles and foibles with the intonation that I really don't like to deal with and are not easy to deal with. They require a substantial effort to correct and actually play in tune on. The more easily fixable one here is the fact that the concert D partial is quite flat relative to both the B flat and F partial surrounding it, although the F partial is of course a little bit higher. And that just means that going from your concert D to your concert E flat, the jump there is a little bit more than a semitone, and it sounds really weird and tends to mess with my head. There's an easy fix. You just use the lower octave fingerings on the higher octave. Of course, if you're trying to play in low pitch, you want to have your valve slides out accordingly. And while these low octave fingerings on the upper octave are a little bit less stable and do take a little bit more work to corral into place, they are, relatively speaking, more in tune than the upper octave C and D fingerings that you would typically use. And to be honest, I'd rather just have to focus a little bit on slotting the partial better than to have to lip it up substantially. The other issue with a lot of sax horn style baritones, this one very much included, that is a lot harder to fix, is the fact that your standard low B-flat partial, just the one an octave above the pedal, is nigh unusable unless you lip it up like absolute crazy. If I just work down to that note scale-wise from, let's say, a tuning B-flat, and I just go down the scale, everything's fine until I let go of the valves for a low B-flat, and it just sits 25-30 cents flat natively, and there's very little I can do about it. I can try to lip it up, and then I ruin the tone on that note, or I can try to get the tone to lock in and slot the note where the horn wants it, and then, again, it's just 30 cents flat. It's basically unusable in any musical context. Basically every baritone I've played that has this lead pipe that curves down straight into a tuning slide, I think there's just something wrong with the bore geometry in a setup like this that really spreads the partials out too far and makes your low B-flat sit much lower than you'd want it. But as far as this instrument goes, yeah, the low register, the pedal register, they're not great. Additionally, the efficiency factor with a leaky instrument like this is not ideal. I find myself breathing a lot because I feel like a lot of my air is being wasted, essentially. It's going into the instrument and it's not really helping produce the tone, and so I'm running out of air faster than I would expect to on, your typical small shank brass band style baritone. All that aside, this instrument is a really cool and unique piece of history, and I did want to feature it on the channel, and on the occasions where I have gotten a half-decent noise out of it, I've been very impressed. I do like the tone when things slot properly. Of course, it's not consistent, because how consistent can it be when the way you make the valves slightly more airtight with the casing is a liquid or more viscous lubricant? Obviously, that's going to shift around as you play, and so you're not going to get great or consistent results out of this instrument ever. But nonetheless, I do hope you enjoyed the demos and the discussion. This has once again been an 1885 English Besson Brevete. Very fun instrument. I hope its new owner will cherish it. Maybe use it more than I have, but then again, like I said, you can't really get too much daily driving out of an instrument this old. Nonetheless, it's cool that this thing is still around. When I bought it, I was hoping for a brass band style baritone to use in my multi-tracking, and while it didn't reach that goal, it did give me a chance to do some more research on the Besson company and learn more about this era of manufacture, and so I've really enjoyed my time with this instrument, and I hope you enjoyed this video as well. Until next time, I appreciate you sticking around, and we'll see you on the flip side. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you want to support the creation of bigger and better content on the Samuel Plays Brass channel, have your name featured right here, and a whole host of other perks and benefits, then please consider pledging your support at patreon.com/SamuelPlaysBrass. For now, you can find more videos in the end screen cards to my left.